looks like Ron DeSantis is out. Kind of a surprising move, don't you think?
A little bit, just because you'd think if he was going to do this, why not do it immediately after Iowa? Why wait? I guess that's the line.
And you could say, because they were arguing back and forth and deciding what to do, but this was my advice. When was it? Thursday or Friday? My advice was he should drop out now, do no more damage to his name. You don't want to look like you lost over and over and over again. Get out now. Stop the damage on the reputation. And I'm torn on that because I'm not sure what's going to happen with Donald Trump. I mean, you could make a case that he's going to go to jail. You could make the case that he's going to hang himself with paper sheets. I mean, God only knows what these people are willing to do to stop him from being president of the United States. And I'd like to have somebody that has some delegates that can broker at the convention. Now, here's what I really would like to say today about Ron DeSantis, and that is 47, Mr. President, listen carefully, please. Will you consider Ron DeSantis as your attorney general? I think he will do more good as attorney general even than he would as your vice president. Make him, and Ron, please, if he gets offered, please take it. Ron DeSantis has law experience up the wazoo. He's a proven fighter. He knows the deep state. If there's anyone who could go in and clean up the Justice Department and then start cleaning up all of the nightmares and return justice back to the Justice Department, I think it's Ron DeSantis. And I think if he would accept that and Donald Trump would announce that now, you would have huge momentum with Ron DeSantis voters. You would also have it with Trump voters. And I think I think Donald Trump should start announcing his team. And perhaps the least important one is vice president. Maybe that's me.
That's interesting. He would be very good at that, I think. It's an interesting fit. A lot of people are like, oh, well, they just said too many bad things about each other. That stuff gets repaired immediately. Yeah. I mean, the fact that not only did he drop out, and the key part of this is he also endorsed Donald Trump, right? Like, there were people who were saying, well, maybe he'll endorse Nikki Haley, which was never going to happen.
Never going to happen.
But the fact that he could have done what Chris Christie did, right, where you drop out, you don't say anything about an endorsement, and then I guess you have 14 hamburgers or whatever Christie did after he dropped out. But you could have done that, and that would have been a plausible thing for him to do. But he just went ahead and admitted what I think everybody knew for a long time, that Donald Trump is probably the person who's going to win this, and why not get on board now?
Can we stop with this analyzing and reanalyzing Ron DeSantis and what did his team do wrong? There's many things you could point out, but the biggest thing that needs to be pointed out is Donald Trump. Once he was indicted, that race was over. It didn't matter if he had the dream team behind him or if he had, the Keystone Cops behind him. Ron DeSantis didn't have a chance to win as soon as Donald Trump was indicted. The mood of the country and the voter changed, and people began to see Donald Trump for really who he is. He's kind of like us. If they'll do that to him, they'll do it to us. So he's kind of fighting for him and us at the same time. They see him as a man who has been wronged, who could have given up, and is now on the verge of losing absolutely everything. Everything. And yet, what? We're going to go for somebody else? No. At this time, the American people, a majority of Republican voters, see that as something that they feel they should support because he's the guy supporting them and fighting the same fight that they're going to have to fight. So Ron didn't have a chance.
Look, I'm glad you brought that up because every piece of analysis I've been seeing and reading is like talking about the DeSantis campaign problems. And look, there were some.
Yes,
like,
of course.
do you want infighting at your super PAC? No, you'd choose not to have that if you had the choice. However, if you think that, like, well, if everyone at the super PAC were really good friends, he would have won in Iowa. I mean, like, that's just, what are you talking about? Like, it's like everyone's analyzing the 20% of the problem when the 80% of the problem is being left unstated. 80% of the problem is that Donald Trump is a very unique figure that has a lock on a lot of the voters in the party, who got a lock on even more of them and an insurmountable amount when he got indicted. And the sort of conservative mind, the Jonathan Haidt going to that analysis of how conservatives think. Loyalty is a really big part of that. Fairness is a really big part of that. And a lot of people think, look, Donald Trump deserves another chance here. And I don't know that was ever able to be overcome. And
no.
To test this, Glenn, I mean, ask, because I've heard this even from some people who really like Donald Trump, big Trump supporters. And it's like, okay, well, Ron DeSantis, they say Ron DeSantis shouldn't have done this. He shouldn't have said this. If his online supporters did this or that or whatever. And I get all that. And you can criticize some of that stuff fairly. But at the end of the day, if Ron DeSantis ran a perfect campaign, was he going to beat your guy?
Nope.
And not a single one of them would say yes. They'd all say, of course not. And they're right, most likely. I don't know that a perfect campaign could have won in this particular circumstance. It's like arguing the best album of all time is from Beyonce, and you're talking to an audience that's 70% Swiftie. It's like, it doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter how good Beyonce's album is. You're never going to win that argument.
Look, here's the thing. No matter what he did, Ron DeSantis had good numbers before the indictment, and when we were just looking at candidates. But what the Democrats did, right or wrong, I mean, it's definitely wrong, but strategy-wise, right or wrong, I don't know, because I don't know what their real thought was on why to indict him, for 7 billion years of prison time. But once they did that, all bets were off. And Donald Trump has something else. And I'm not saying that Ron DeSantis doesn't have this, or anybody that was running doesn't have this. But this is in real question now from most people. Does this politician even like America? Do they like America? Donald Trump, the one thing you cannot question is he loves America, loves it. And that is it's strangely kind of a baseline. You have to have that stone put into your foundation, and it has to be rock solid. And the one thing about Donald Trump is, he loves America, and that's not to slight anybody else. It is to slight some of the Democrats, but it's not to slight anybody else that was running. It's just so very clear that Donald Trump is sincere in his love for America, and I think that goes a very long way.
I think so, too. And look, people believe that he's going to be the guy. I mean, a lot of this is you look to a person who has done the job already. He's basically an incumbent to the Republicans, right? This is already those advantages are built in. He's got an incredibly, prominent profile, one of the most famous, outside of maybe Taylor Swift, probably the most famous person in the world. And, he's a guy that people are lining up behind because most of the voters in the Republican voting populace believe he's being targeted and wronged in a major way. And the fact that they're not only trying to take away his presidency, his legacy, his future prospects, but also his life. They want to take his life and throw it into prison.
I think we are approaching a new time where you could go further than that. Well, I hate to say that, and I don't want to assign that to anyone. I'm not saying that it's the Democrats or anything else, but I think there are those who hate Donald Trump so much and are sick. They're absolutely sick, and that wouldn't mind ending his life, unfortunately.
That's, a dark place I don't want to go to, obviously. But I know you don't as well. But you get to that point where the question now just becomes, look, number one, Nikki Haley has a chance to play out the string here. She has a chance to try to be competitive and maybe win New Hampshire. I mean, the polls aren't particularly optimistic on that fact, but like she's going to get a decent percentage in that state and have a chance to move on to South Carolina. It's her home state. She deserves the chance to play out the string. I don't want to act like it's completely over, but for all intents and purposes, it probably is. We talked about that sort of tier 1, tier 2 primary, right? The tier 1 is a normal campaign, the normal way things play out. Everyone competes to win. That one, to me, is largely over. You still have tier 2, though, which is what happens to Donald Trump and what happens after if they throw him in prison. And who knows on that one. What's interesting about Haley is there's really no reason to drop out. Right? I don't know. Maybe I'm not going to see this the same way she does. But like, if you're here, why not keep your campaign alive and just keep these delegates coming in at 25 and 30%? She'll probably get 25, 30% in most of these states. She'll be able to bank delegates. And, if something happens with Donald Trump,
you have a say.
You have a say. And like, I don't know what the downside is. If she, and this leaves only Ryan Binkley left, Glenn. And I have thought about this. I have not been able to figure out a way to do it. But if I could figure out a way to right now bet on Ryan Binkley being second place in the delegate count, I would do it. Because the most likely thing that happens here is Haley drops out. He's the only one left. And he just, and if you don't know who he is, he's running for president on the Republican side. But he's going to.
That doesn't really help me knowing who he is.
No, but he'll still.
That's just what he's doing currently.
Right.
I still have no idea who Binkley is.
He is a Dallas businessman and pastor, and has been running the whole time. But again, I don't think there's any reason for him to drop out. And whoever isn't Donald Trump is going to get some delegates here. Haley, you'd think, would be, well, why not me? I can stick around if this thing falls apart at the top, which is possible. I mean, again, we keep talking about how serious these threats are for Donald Trump. It's not impossible that some of these legal threats wind up working out in a way that, we all know we're going to the Supreme Court with him being on the ballot or not. My complete belief is that the Supreme Court will be correct on this and he will be placed on the ballot in these states. But it's not impossible that he's not. And if these things go the wrong way for Donald Trump, there has to be somebody else there. What might happen is the party comes together and they just do something, and like that's ugly. If you're Nikki Haley, you got a bunch of delegates, you at least have an argument at that table. And we're talking about, the leadership of the free world here. I don't know. You're gonna what part of her reputation is she really going to protect by dropping out?